sexy as it's supposed to look. Okay. I think I'm just going to take it off.
Okay.
So, hello YouTube.
Hello YouTube and podcast listeners.
And our followers on Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr. I'm SK.
And I'm Nay.
And we're the Dichologists. And in today's episode 2 of our channel and podcast, we are going to talk about the Butch-Femme dynamic and its influence on contemporary queer relationships as well as sex. Which is why I had my little glove over here, but it didn't work. And prior to starting about each of the terms, I really kind of, I was thinking about our last video, and I thought it's really important to be honest about how we used to think about certain terms. So, for example, in my story, I talked about how at some point in college, I really thought the term bisexual to be archaic, and that was foolish. And at some point later in grad school, I thought the term lesbian was really archaic, and that was foolish and a karmic slap in the ass now.
It's true.
And so when we start to think through more of the terminology, I really, we got to stay honest about what we thought of these things in the past. So when we talk about words like femme and words like butch and the butch-femme split, what did it mean to you in the past? What, prior to this relationship, did you think defined the word butch and defined the word femme?
Well, I thought, that, being young, right, and growing up, going to the pier and all that when I was a kid, a little baby Butch.
Baby Butch on the pier. I mean,
in the
literally.
Streets of New York.
All of the cliches.
Exactly.
We so far have that Nay likes pit bulls, found out she's gay on the basketball team, and hung out as a baby Butch on New York City piers, which is a very specific place. Who goes there?
A lot of people. Well, I don't know so much about now, though. This was like years ago when I was that age, and I don't really think like the space, is ours anymore, really. I don't really think. I mean, I know people still go down there for Pride, but other than that, I don't really think it's like the hangout spot anymore.
Yeah, and I don't think as Grombler, being in our 30s.
I know, I was about to say that
we go
too.
down there.
We don't really go
as
anymore,
much either, but the area has been gentrified, the area has been policed, and the area has a lot of presence of like cops and surveillance of other kinds against queer people of color and trans folks of color. So that's as far as we understand it now in a much more academic fashion, and other than going there every once in a while. When you're there during the day, it's a bunch of white people running around with their little dogs and their little joggings, right? So,
but to go back to what I thought it meant at the time, especially when I was younger, I thought, that, I'm the butch and I, pay for dinners and, like, I get to, really, like, assert myself and, be in control at least most of the time. Maybe control a little bit for the femme, but mostly, control with me. And, I really had a really big ego, and, even now I had to, and being with this lovely person, as
folks,
I always say.
I need help with rolling my eyes further. I need support and a special instrument of making it go higher up in my head. Oh!
I really had to.
You know what? We have some witnesses, so I'm not going to do any kind of, punishment for you on camera. But what have you come to realize since being in this relationship regarding the terms butch and femme, or the idea that butch folks go with femme ones?
Right. Well, I learned that, one, not everybody identifies as a butch or a femme, and that was kind of surprising. I know when we first got together, you told me you were agender, and at the time, you, I don't think you were a lesbian yet or identified as one, but, now that you do, it was just very different for me, because in my head, everything was, butch, femme, and that's just what went together and what made more sense, Did
you ever think that those words belonged more to the white community as opposed to words like stud or AGs or, stems?
I don't think femme so much did. I thought butch was more of like a white kind of term. mainly went by stud or AG, aggressive. I thought that was more what was prominent in the black community, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I didn't really identify with Butch. So.
Well, then you should have said so. Any case, back to the story. Now that you met an agender person who then went on to identifying as a lesbian, what did you think your relationships should look like?
Well, I don't know, in my head, I still felt like it should still be like, even though you don't identify as a femme, I thought that I still identify as...
Ooh, little learning time.
No.
Yes, we celebrate learning here, okay? Not everybody who's agender does not identify as a femme. Some folks do, some folks don't, so it's really a very individual decision. So I think we need to separate one's sexuality from one's gender identity, from one's gender presentation, because I think if you look at me, people will say that's a badass femme, or like some kind of hard femme or something like that, and I really just don't feel an affinity to the term at all, which may or may not have to do with my being agender, but it just isn't something that I ever identified with, because I was in relationships with cis and straight men for a large portion of my life, and despite being poly... A moment of silence.
Yes. Back to recently scheduled programming.
And despite being poly and identifying as queer and being with women and trans folks every now and again, I really didn't think the Butch Femme split had anything to do with me. And I really didn't think it had much to do with what I was seeing in the queer community anyway. It was just kind of a very distant thing that maybe folks did in the past, and maybe I heard, it not really working for people, that maybe other folks thought it was reproducing the heterosexual dynamic, which I think is one of the largest myths about the Butch Femme split. And the reason it's a myth is because when two women or two folks that look like women to the outside world are in a relationship, they're not reproducing heterosexuality because they're not straight.
Right.
And they are not a man and a woman. They are lesbians or queer couples or bisexual folks in a relationship or what have you. And because we all grow up in a very toxic sludge of toxic masculinity and sexism, some of the ways people interact in queer relationships kind of incorporates that sort of socialization. That's where that comes from, I think. But when I entered this relationship, not only did I have to get to know sort of on a more personal level the legacy of what the word lesbian means and carries, and reclaiming it for myself, because like I said previously, I thought it was a very outdated term, and I regret that deeply now, because I really do identify with it. And so I knew that I would have to deal with some of the stuff that comes with being in a position of stud or AG or whatever, but I just didn't know how much it was going to affect our relationship, or how much of it has been embedded into your way of interacting with people. So I think what happened is that you encountered a very strong resistance to being in a particular role for me, and you had to really unlearn a lot of things. So what would you say has been the biggest struggle in terms of unlearning some of that Butch Femme split?
Well, the biggest struggle is really just been trying to get over my ego. It was a lot of...
It's very big. The ego is actually outside of the space that the camera can capture
it. Yeah.
Right. Some phenomena are beyond bound, and your ego is one of those things. But in all seriousness, what does working to minimize that part of yourself mean to you?
Well, I mean, at first it meant, or I thought it meant, that I had to erase a part of myself, right? I felt like that was so embedded in, who I was as a person and all that I had learned to be from a very young age, But now I feel like, I see where, it's just not helpful, it's not good for us. It's, very childish. And a lot of times, you would bring that up, and I would take it as, offensive and be like, I'm an adult. Like, who are you talking to?
That's a really good
like...
sign of an adult.
But
it's
I had to really learn
maturity.
that, like, it's not cool to have such a big ego, and I really had to, like, take a step back when we would, have an argument about something and be like, are you upset because what she said is true and you're just, in your, like, in your feelings and your ego's hurt? Or are you upset because, you don't think that what she said had any, standing? And majority of the time, like 99% probably, it was just because my feelings were hurt. And, she's a very blunt person.
I am.
And so I just had to really...
It's a Russian thing.
It is a Russian thing. I really had to figure that out. But now that I have figured that out, I'm just...
She's working on figuring it out.
Yeah, I'm working on it. But I do realize more, when my ego is coming into play and when it's a factor. And
we're running a little bit long on this video, which I don't mind doing for this subject. Right. I mean, just because I think these are real important points, I just wanted to get us into the sex, which, is both right. Exactly. Let's take a moment of sexy silence for all kinds of thoughts about sex. We're not really...
we should have our first on-screen
do you want our first on-screen
kiss?
What
do you think, guys?
That kind of... that kind of assumes there will be more on-screen kisses and perhaps other sorts of things, and it's not that kind of channel, I mean, you'd never know, but it's, and I you know what, let's just...
Okay, that's enough.
I do...
That's enough.
I'm gonna get all red. I do like when she goes for the neck, But in terms of sex, what do you think the haunting of the Butch Femme split does there? Because, right, as far as I knew of AGs and the touch-me-nots and the folks who are studs, a lot of the time, it's a no-go in terms of touching one's breasts or penetrating a person, and of course you can't make assumptions like that about everyone who identifies that way, and you really need to get into it with a person and, like, establish something that looks like trust, that looks like safety, to figure that out. But I've had enough experiences, not as much as you, but I've had enough experiences, she's been around. And here we are very sex positive, and we both identify as salors. I forgot to put that on a paper. But,
teaching moment.
But that's not an academic term. I'm just trying to make it an academic term. And slurs are folks who are sluts and whores simultaneously. So I think the folks who invented the term, want to assign a measure of intensity to how much we sleep around. And I just want everybody
We're perfectly okay with sluts and whores, by the way.
Yeah, and then if
don't think it's really a real thing.
Yeah, if the degree to which you sleep around is not as much as our previous histories, you know what? That's okay. We just really want you to stick it to all the folks who think that having any kind of sex life is an issue, and not having any kind of sex life is an issue, and we're tired. We're over it. It's done. We're no longer going to have a conversation about whether or not we should assign moral and all kinds of other values to what you do with your own self. Okay,
right.
So back to sex. I mean, I had a lot of my own stereotypes, and I had a lot of my own ideas about what lesbian sex looks like, and what do they do, and should we all watch blue is the warmest color? And the answer is no. And, it was a whole new world for me of exploration, but exploration is hard. And what was hard was that she wasn't incredibly receptive to any kind of thing that I wanted to do. And I'm a very earnest person in bed, okay? And I'm a very earnest person in life, but I wanted to do... It's because she licks her lips that I can never finish a thought on this channel, okay? It starts to make me shake the camera, and then everybody gets hot and bothered, and okay, so you weren't very receptive, and I think it took many years for me to convince you to feel safe and to be receptive. But I think the bigger issue for femme folks, or for folks on the other end of whatever the split looks like, they're always already assumed to be comfortable with being receptive, with having to be on the bottom for some or most of the time, and they are required to provide the emotional labor, to think through sex, to think through the relationship, and it flows in and out, right? Like what you do in bed affects what you have in life, and vice versa. And so, I mean, we're nowhere near perfect. We're nowhere near at the top of like what mountain that exists in terms of nirvana and lesbian pleasure and experience. But I'm really, really happy that in aspects in and outside of the bedroom, we have finally come to some kind of agreement that you deserve pleasure, that I deserve rest from providing you with emotional labor, and that we can be equals in terms of how our roles are set up in the relationship. And I think a lot of people would be kind of like, well, we're equals, we're just in a butch femme relationship, have different things that we each do, and we agree to do it. And you know what, like if that works for you, obviously that's really, really cool and really, really fine. You can cough on camera. It's important to provide people with a relatable experience, and it's allergy season. And we're just going to own our bodily functions here, okay? We're not gonna make that too dirty. And next time you should have the tea right here so you can just stay in frame. It really bugs me when she gets out of frame, okay? Maybe there's like a metaphor.
I know you want to see my cute face all the fucking time.
There's a metaphor
You could say it
in there somewhere. I want to see all of you all the time.
But yeah, I mean, as far as what I thought, about it, I did have my own baggage and a lot of shit, that I had to sort through. And
sexually.
Yes, sexually.
How did you do that work?
Well, you really. I mean, I
know I did the work.
I haven't had a partner, that really made me feel safe and was, really assured me that they were interested in my, pleasure and, me figuring that out and what that really means, And so I, really had to take a lot of moments to, figure out what that really means, and also to, to open myself up to you more. I realized that, I had, expectations of her opening herself up, to me, but I was, kind of closed off, and it wasn't to where I didn't, allow her to touch me. I did, and I'm not a touch me not.
Which is fine.
Which is fine, right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just saying that, I'm not that, or was it, but even though, that I did allow her to touch me, it still made me, this is very distracting. Like how you say about me. Like I need to complete a thought, Anyway, so it still made me realize, that I expected a lot from her, but I wasn't really, reciprocating
yes,
and giving it back.
That's a good and important word.
In the, in the same measure to where I was, expecting it.
So where are we now? Important. I mean, do you identify as a stud now, or as an AG, or as a butch person?
I still identify as a stud, yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Well, it just, to me, it just really means like a masculine, sense of person. But it has a different meaning now, learning, a lot of these new things, and, learning that I don't have to always be in charge, and I don't always have to...
When are you ever in charge? Where's my gloves?
I love you, boo.
Where are my gloves? Okay, because
no
you
beef,
got no fingerprints,
no beef,
no trouble.
We good. We good.
Oh, please don't do this. Please don't do this. Please don't do this.
But anyway, so what does it now mean for you?
I think that in many ways the butch femme split is a limiting concept. For example, not only does it provide very limited roles for folks that are in a butch femme relationship, it also makes it true that two butch people cannot be in a relationship with one another in a way that's as celebrated. Right. And when there are two femme people in a relationship, they are hypersexualized, fetishized. And
I don't
also,
think people really like believe them when
right,
they say they're together, right? Like they're
they're
made a joke of,
made invisible by saying that they're not actually queer. So it's interesting that mainstream society and our own communities kind of decide what the boundaries are, and the boundaries are very rigid. And it's just kind of like Same Difference, the documentary. Shout out! We cannot wait
Where's
to watch
that, though?
it. Where is it? I just want to see it, and I would honestly like sell my well, all right, within reason.
Like if you guys can figure out how to give us a copy, or like how we can watch it some way, we promise to do a banging review on the different good. Concepts and themes that you guys have going on. But I think at this point, and especially a lot of other people, I've been seeing a lot of stuff on Facebook like, where's that though? Where's that?
Yeah. So the documentary is called Same Difference, and it's about the Black queer lesbian community trying to figure out the sort of butch femme split, or whatever the terminology that they're using at this time. And I really wanted to show it in my classes. I wanted to watch it for our own selves, because you can like educate others on this concept, but you got to live through them too, and that's what we're doing, and you're kind of doing it with us. So on that note, I think we can sign off, and in our next video we'll be talking about our interracial relationship and
how people view us on the street.
Unapologetically black life. I got her that shirt.
She did. She's the best.
And on my shirt it says "Не мой президент," which is Russian for "not my president." So we are showing you some of our political fashion right now. Well, obviously not, because black women tried to save us in this election.
We did,
and we must thank you.
Get your life all the way.
Thank you, black women, for overwhelmingly trying to save this country. We don't deserve you. No. All right.
All right, folks. Signing off.
Later.
Later.